Lithium miners on the ASX have performed exceptionally well over the last couple of days, weeks and month. What we do see is that these performers have broken out of overhead resistance and patterns that are similar across the range. So we're going to have a look at a lot of lithium miners to see what's similar in when they've broken out and how many of them are precursors to the other ones running. This is Finer Market Points, where we connect leading market themes and top performing companies for better trading. You can like the video to support the channel, click subscribe for updates, and comment below to let us know which lithium miners you're trading and which patterns they're breaking out of. First off, when we have a look at lithium, we want to know what the commodity's been doing itself. So it doesn't trade as much as iron ore, copper, gold and those ones. So we're looking at these moving averages being these lines on the chart to see how they've traded. You can see December 2020 here last year that it did really come from an uptick and it has put on more than a 100%. The sort of flat line throughout May, June and July. It's kind of interesting to see that the commodity itself is flatlined while we've seen some of these leading companies break out of patterns and run significantly higher. If we zero in here, we can see that what we've got is Galaxy. It's done it before. It's had a congestion pattern here, which is arguably a high and tight flag. And then we've had this downward channel, this downward movement, sort of three thrusts lower, and then breaking out over this downward resistance line for a strong rally. And then we've got another resistance line forming in over here. Galaxy Resources has broken out of that quite recently, and we do see a very similar pattern with Orocobre and this three thrust movement. Big rally here, not quite a high and tight flag, but did rally out of the congestion throughout December 2020, and then we'll zoom in here and make it a bit easier. Then we did see this more congestion with this downward channel, these three thrusts higher before consolidating and then running up much harder out of this sort of $5 level on that downward resistance line, and we're seeing a similar thing. Three lower highs and then lower lows, but has broken out just recently. So this has stemmed a lot of traders to come back and have a look at lithium miners to see what's been happening. Let's run through and see where these leaders have been running, because it did start with an early breakout from Liontown Resources, which is a company we've looked at many times before on Finer Market Points, the top 6 lithium miners, and you can see that in the other episodes within this lithium series. So we do see that they ran sideways in this churn, 40-50 cents, and then they do break out to have huge volume, rallying up for about almost 100% gain. What we do want to see is when we zero in on these, we've seen this sideways churn, and we do want to see that buying potential. What indicates where there can be a buy? So if you haven't seen pocket pivots before, we'll be doing a video on that soon. You can see that there's one just down here, 27th of May. It does break out, gives you an indication on this blue line, which is the 10-day moving average. It's also coming out of this overhead resistance, this downward trend line, and has been tightening up on the lows, compressing on the green line, which is the 50-day moving average. All of that's working towards what is a pocket pivot. In the same time, we're seeing somewhat of a volatility contraction pattern where it has come down from its lows, had a bit of a rally, fallen but less, somewhat stabilized rally, less of a contraction, little rally, less of a contraction into that pocket pivot. That leads into the breakout that we do see in this strong rally for Liontown, which has been that movement that we see late May, and we will find a fair few others that did break out around the same sort of time. So we've got Pilbara Minerals, PLS is the ticker. This is a company that we have looked at many times before, and when you have a look at this chart, there's quite an obvious reason why we look at it so many times, because it's rallied exceptionally well, coming from sort of this 20-30 cent region all the way up to sort of $1.60 now. Now what was critical here is this pocket pivot break here, and we do see this volume breakout here on the 27th of May. That does come down. We're seeing this overhead resistance in the same time of a volatility contraction. Volatility contraction pattern. You can click on the links below to look at a tutorial of how to trade volatility contraction patterns. But what we've seen is this big drop off here, a bit of a bounce, another drop. If you can consider this as one contraction in itself, then it does drop, and then a third one here to come into that pocket pivot on the breakout while breaking out over the swing high and then looking to break this downward trend line here, which it has done. Depending on where you draw that trend line, it breaks out with that pocket pivot that we do see down here with this volume spike, 27th of May. Coincides around the same time as Liontown is starting to run for those lithium miners breaking out. We do see less pure plays with Mineral Resources. They were also running, but they've been on that good strong tailwind with commodity prices running high. They do have exposure to many other commodities, so Mineral Resources is less of a pure play, but does have exposure in the lithium space. Same with IGO. We've got IGO here, similar sort of movement. They did have a lot of strong forces coming from commodity prices running exceptionally well. So we have seen that with IGO, but then they do have that sideways consolidation. There was a breakdown here, so then we see coming back towards that $7 region, which was a bit of a concern, and then suddenly breaks out over less of a volume spike. You would expect to see that sort of pop to have more of a volume spike, but nonetheless they did break out. Harder to trade this one on that breakout, but it has been in that lithium space as well and somewhat included. Another one that has had a phenomenal pattern is Vulcan Energy with a recent breakout in the last week or so. Volatility contraction pattern once again. You're going to see this many times again in these lithium miners. Huge rally, comes into a contraction, working down to somewhat of a base, churns sideways, goes for a bit of a rally, and then does contract once again, comes down and compresses. You see a lot of these tight closes here on the 50-day moving average, this green line, and then it does burst out above it, tries to rally, breaks out over the recent highs here, but then gets selling pressure, doesn't manage to maintain that breakout, and then does get sold down back to the 50-day moving average. This churn sideways, what we want to do is zoom in to see how it's behaved along here, because you do want to look forward down the bottom here. You want to see this volume breakout, a big solid green bar, which you can see here on the 5th of July. This 5th of July candle here is just above the 10-day moving average. So it's arguable whether you want to call that a pocket pivot or not. But what we do also see is it breaks that downward trend line as well. So this downward trend line has been drawn. You do see the 5th of July, we'll highlight it here. That's breaking that downward trend line here. So this, and it's also making its way over this recent swing high. That's positive movement. That is a pocket pivot breaking out of a volatility contraction pattern in a strong theme, which is consistently what we're surfacing in miner market points and these top 6 mining companies that we are, or top 6 companies that we're consistently bringing on the themes. And then that does lead into this rally that we have seen to date. That's what's happened with Vulcan Energy, and you do see 21% gain over the last month, being the best so far that we've listed. You've also seen Galaxy, and then we see Orocobre at the same time. If we want to have a look in comparison to the ETF that many use for exposure or a passive exposure into the lithium ion battery, we do see ACDC somewhat showing that the commodities, a basket of commodities used for lithium ion batteries, haven't been performing as well, and we do know that from the lithium that we saw before. So obviously that rally's been strong. We've seen it. We know that what has happened since the COVID lows. But this has run sideways, and this has actually been down while we're seeing these lithium companies rally up. So what we're going to do is have a look at some other ones that are also running now. And this is in that same lithium space. So we see PSC, which is Prospect Resources. We'll zero in on this chart to see that it's much less liquid than what we're seeing from many other companies. But you do see that breakout happening, the same sort of thing. So late May, we saw some of these early ones, Liontown, Pilbara, those ones running. We do see similar sort of thing breaking out of resistance and then moving up PSC. A bit of a volume spikes down here. We did see heavy volume coming in, somewhat of accumulation around the 15, under the 15 cents, stabilizing, and then does break out. We see some volume spikes June, then also in July with solid runs. We're going from 18 cents up over 30 cents. You can see that with PSC. We're going to find some other ones. Vulcan Energy is a similar sort of thing, not as liquid as some of the bigger names, but has been running well. We've got Galan Lithium as well. GLN, you're going to look at that early June, we're seeing that breakout of that little resistance, that congestion that we see, and then the continuation coming into July with these volume spikes as well. So you do see that congestion sideways popping up. You do see sort of a pocket pivot. That's on a breakout. That's a buyable gap up, which is another pattern in itself. But a good, strong volume. Once again, volume breaking out over highs, fresh highs, strong volume pushing up, coming back down to sit near these highs, congest near it, and then break out once more. That's Galan Lithium being a part of that earlier move that we did see throughout June. We're going to have a look at other ones, which is INR, the ticker. So we have seen their chart as well. That's been a later June breakout, less liquid as well, but Ioneer has been moving. Then we've also looking at AGY. So another lithium exposure company, less liquid once again, you can tell that from the chart, but they have been starting to move. Early June, they did break out of that sideways congestion, which is Argosy Minerals. We have looked at this as a lithium miner before on finer market points, and that is starting to move with more momentum. Then we also see Galaxy's done that before. So we've seen Galaxy, we'll have a review of the chart for the timing. So you've got early June, it did actually come down on the nose, hit pressure, but this is a more recent move that we're talking about in the last week where they're breaking out of that overhead resistance. Orocobre, the same sort of thing. Then we also see NMT. So we want to look at this for the time frame perspective. So Neometals, you are looking at that early June. It did start late May, Early June did start to rally, didn't maintain it, but did come back to sit on this high here, which is a minor high, but also congesting a sort of nice line, recent lows, and then has been rallying throughout early July. Less of a rally that we do see even for the month, but it is another one in that same space. And then PLS is also another one. Pilbara Minerals that we have looked at before, bringing that in to have a look at the time frames. You've got the late May, early June rally. That's been the main movement. That's been the main sort of precursor to these movements that we've seen in the last couple of days. Other ones that we have seen, which are also exposed in that same space. So we've got AVZ Minerals, which we have looked at before, and you do see that that's how it's been rallying up. It's just been working inside with that Galaxy and Orocobre in the last couple of days and week as that's been breaking out. Another one, MIO. If we can get that chart to work, MIO there. So there's another one in that same space, recently running off the back of it, Macarthur Minerals. Then we have another one that we've seen many times before, which is Jindalee Resources. That has been a top performer. We'll see on the chart as to why, with these massive rallies up. Similar sort of three thrust movement, 1, 2, 3 lower highs. Fortunately, it did have higher lows at the same time, unlike Galaxy and Orocobre recently, but then does break out a massive volume. It is coming down to somewhat of a baseline, sitting on these ice lines here, and then coming in well under the 50-day moving average. You can see that green line sitting above it, but has started to pop up more recently. Then we're rounding out, having a look at a few more. We've also got Auroch Minerals, AOU, in the similar sort of space. That has been breaking out well and truly under this 200-day moving average, which is a bad sign. It means it's coming from a much lower base and got a lot more resistance to push through. You can see these 3 lower highs, but didn't manage to break out the same way as Galaxy and Orocobre, and a lower liquidity company as well. Finally, we've got LIT, which has been running at the same sort of thing. Lithium Australia, the last couple of days has been running off that, but it is a less mature company than your Galaxies and Orocobres that have been running very, very well. What we do want to look is see which ones have performed the best. You've got Jindalee down 3%. We jump all the way up to the best performers. We've got Prospect Resources up 50% for the month, 33% for Galan, Ioneer 25, Auroch 21. Having a look at the quarter, these are also interesting numbers. We've got some that are still down, Jindalee, Auroch and Lithium Australia. Lithium price is pretty much flat throughout the week, the month, and the quarter, down marginally. Liontown Resources, a company that we've seen many times before. Here's that chart to put that into perspective. Massive rally, 100% gains. Whether this turns out to be a high and tight flag, we'll see. It's rare to see this trading hold in there, and then we want to see sideways congestion and to maintain at least 50% of this rally. In the flagpoles, we generally don't want to see this sideways consolidation. We want to see a pretty sharp flagpole, like a continuation of this sort of movement. That tends to be a better performing, or a metric that helps better performances with these high and tight flags. They're the best ones over the last quarter, and then 63%. If we look at this, bring this perspective out over the year, we're including coming from the COVID lows. You've got Vulcan Energy almost 300%, Jindalee 210, Galan Lithium 200, Liontown 185, PLS 171. Very strong performances. So this is what we're consistently doing on Finer Market Points, is surfacing these top thematics and then connecting them with the best performing companies, looking at them on weekly, fortnightly and monthly bases to have a look at how these companies are performing, what's the news behind them, and then as we do here, have a look at the charts to see what are the similarities, and we're going to bring that back here to have a look at Orocobre to really zero in on that pattern that we do see with that breakout most recently. And we do want to see that has been very similar to what we saw with Galaxy. So remember, we got one high here, second one almost coming up, a third one, and then the lower lows. So in between a low and a low, put that cross. So we've got Orocobre, and we also see that at the same time as Galaxy. How did that perform at similar times? We've got a rally up, a low, rally, not quite getting up to the highs, a lower low, trying to rally once more, and then breaking out of that. This is a critical point. When we do see these patterns in the same thematics emerge, we've seen it over a decade ago with non-conventional energy companies running. We had biodiesel, we had a lot of other things running where you did have companies in the same exposure, the same commodity, the same thematic. When they broke, it tended to be a precursor for the rest of them to break. So if we can trade these, identify pocket pivots within these patterns, then we do have very low risk entries to trade these significant patterns that can have explosive movements. And as you can see here, massive rallies, good, strong performances. That's it for us. Thanks for joining us. Click subscribe if you want the updates.